Jake Thompson's boots hit the metal deck with a dull thud as he stepped off the transport shuttle. The massive viewing window ahead showed Titan Prime, a swirling orange and red gas giant that filled half the sky. Floating in orbit around it was Nexus Military Academy, a sprawling station of gleaming metal and glowing energy shields. His stomach dropped as he realized this was real. He was actually here. The first human to make it through the qualification tests in 12 years. Back on Earth, everyone said it was impossible. Humans were too weak, too slow, too fragile for galactic military service. But somehow, Jake had passed every test they threw at him. The docking bay buzzed with activity as dozens of new cadets from across the galaxy gathered their gear. Jake shouldered his simple duffel bag and looked around at his future classmates. They were nothing like the humans back home. To his left stood something that looked like a walking nightmare. Crix towered over everyone at nearly 8 feet tall, with 4 arms ending in razor-sharp claws. His exoskeleton was black as space and looked like it could stop a bullet. 6 compound eyes tracked movement around the room with predatory focus. When he moved, Jake could hear the clicking of armored plates. On his right, a creature called Velm was having what appeared to be a casual conversation with another cadet, but Jake could see thick scales covering every inch of his body, each one overlapping like natural body armor. When Velm gestured, his claws left scratch marks in the metal railing he was leaning against. Jake looked down at his own pale, soft hands. No claws, no armor, no natural weapons at all. Just pink skin that looked paper-thin compared to everyone else here. Attention, new recruits? A booming voice echoed through the docking bay. General Korath strode into view, and Jake's breath caught. The alien commander stood 12 feet tall, with skin like molten rock. Heat waves shimmered around his massive frame, and when he breathed, small flames flickered from his nostrils. The general's burning orange eyes swept across the assembled cadets before settling on Jake. For a moment, those ancient eyes studied him with what looked like concern. "Welcome to Nexus Academy," Korath's voice rumbled like distant thunder. "You represent the finest warriors from 47 different worlds. Each of you has proven your worth through trials that would break lesser beings." Jake stood straighter, trying to look like he belonged among these living weapons. However, the general continued, his gaze returning to Jake. "We must address special circumstances. We have a human among us this cycle." Murmurs rippled through the crowd. Jake felt dozens of alien eyes turning toward him. Some looked curious, others dismissive. A few seemed almost pitying. "Humans are classified as a Category 7 fragile species," Korath announced. "They require additional safety protocols during training. Their soft tissue and brittle bones cannot withstand standard military exercises." Jake's face burned with embarrassment as the whispers grew louder. He caught fragments of conversation from nearby cadets. "Look at that pink skin. One good hit, and he's done. ... Why did they even let him come here?" Crix's compound eyes fixed on Jake with what might have been amusement. "You are very small, human Jake," the insectoid warrior clicked in broken galactic standard. "Very soft-looking, like a grub." Velm's scaled head tilted as he examined Jake. "I have heard humans break easily. Is this true? Your bones are hollow like birds." "No, they're not hollow," Jake replied, trying to keep his voice steady. "We're stronger than we look." This drew actual laughter from several cadets. One alien that resembled a walking crystal formation chimed like broken glass. "Strong? You have no natural armor, no claws, no venom, no heat resistance. What protection do you have?" Jake wanted to argue, but what could he say? Compared to these living tanks, humans really did seem pathetically vulnerable. Maybe everyone back on Earth was right. Maybe he didn't belong here. General Korath raised a massive hand for silence. "The human will receive modified training appropriate to his species' limitations." Dismissed. As the crowd dispersed, Jake stood alone in the docking bay, watching his new classmates file out. Their casual displays of strength were intimidating. Crix casually lifted a supply crate that probably weighed half a ton. Velna's claws left deep grooves in the wall he brushed against. Jake picked up his simple duffel bag and followed them into his new life, wondering if he'd made the biggest mistake of his life. The training deck hummed with energy as Jake strapped on his combat gear. 3 weeks had passed since his arrival, and today marked their first real weapons exercise. Around him, his fellow cadets prepared with calm confidence that Jake envied. They'd grown up knowing they were warriors. He was still trying to convince himself he belonged here. "All right, maggots," Sergeant Thax barked, his forearms gesturing toward a rack of strange-looking weapons. "Today you learn about neural disruptors. These beauties don't just hurt your body, they scramble your brain like eggs in a pan." Jake picked up one of the weapons. It felt heavier than it looked, with a blue crystal core that pulsed with contained energy. The grip was designed for alien hands, making it awkward to hold properly. "One clean hit will put any of you in the medical bay for 2 days minimum," Thax continued, his reptilian eyes glinting. "Some of you soft shells might be out for a week. The neural trauma makes you forget how to walk, talk, sometimes even breathe properly." Crix clicked his mandibles and what Jake had learned was laughter. "Sounds fun, Sergeant." "Oh, it is," Thax grinned, showing rows of needle-sharp teeth. "For those of us watching, the weapon reads your species' neural patterns and delivers just enough shock to simulate a real battlefield injury without actually killing you. Usually." Jake's stomach twisted. "Usually. Now pair up and start shooting each other," Thax ordered. "Thompson, you're with Velm? Let's see how that fragile human wiring holds up." The scaled warrior nodded at Jake with something that might have been sympathy. "I will try to aim somewhere non-vital, human Jake." They took positions on opposite sides of the training arena. Other pairs had already begun firing, and Jake watched in horror as cadets dropped like stones when hit. A crystalline being named Zeph took a shot to the shoulder and immediately collapsed, his body convulsing as electrical sparks danced across his surface. Medical drones swooped in to carry him away. "Your turn, human," Velm called out, raising his weapon. "Try not to die permanently." Jake barely had time to raise his own disruptor before Velm fired. The energy bolt struck him square in the chest, and the world exploded into white-hot pain. It felt like being struck by lightning, while having his brain stirred with a spoon. Every nerve in his body screamed at once. His muscles locked up, and he flew backward through the air, crashing into the arena wall with a sickening thud. The pain was beyond anything Jake had ever experienced. It wasn't just physical hurt. It was like his thoughts were being scrambled and rearranged. For a moment, he couldn't remember his own name or where he was. The world spun in nauseating circles. Around the arena, all activity had stopped. Even the ongoing matches paused as instructors and cadets stared at Jake's motionless form. The medical scanners mounted on the walls began shrieking alarms. "Holy stars," Sergeant Thax muttered, checking his readings. The impact force registered at 847 units. That's enough to crack Crix's exoskeleton into pieces. Medical Officer Dace rushed over with her scanning equipment, her tentacles working frantically over the displays. Neural disruption is off the charts. Brain activity is completely chaotic. How is he even conscious? But Jake wasn't really conscious. Not properly. Everything felt like it was happening underwater, muffled and distant. His vision kept cutting in and out, like a broken video screen. When he tried to move his arm, his leg twitched instead. The neural pathways in his brain were completely scrambled. 30 seconds passed. The medical team was preparing a stretcher when something impossible happened. Jake groaned and rolled over onto his hands and knees. "What the ... Dace backed away, Her scanner is still showing massive neural trauma. This is impossible. His brain patterns are still completely disrupted. Jake pushed himself to his feet, swaying like a drunk. His vision was blurry, and he had to concentrate hard just to remember which way was up. But somehow, he was standing. Jake. Velna approached cautiously. Human Jake, can you hear me? You should not be moving. Jake shook his head hard, trying to clear the fog. I'm okay. Just, ... Give me a second. The entire training deck had gone silent. Even the other exercises had stopped, as everyone stared at the human who should have been in a coma. Impossible, Fax whispered, checking his instruments again. The readings haven't changed. His neural patterns are still completely scrambled. He should be unconscious for days. Jake picked up his weapon from where it had fallen. His hands were shaking, and his balance was off, but he was functional, more or less. Ready for round 2? He asked Veln, though his voice sounded strange, even to himself. Dace waved her tentacles frantically. No, absolutely not. This human needs immediate medical attention. Our equipment must be malfunctioning. But Jake was already walking back to his position, leaving everyone to stare at readings. That made no sense, and wonder what kind of species could take a hit that would hospitalize anyone else and just shake it off. By the end of the week, Jake had become the Academy's most talked about mystery. Every instructor had heard about the human who walked away from a neural disruptor blast that should have left him brain dead, but instead of being impressed, they were frustrated. The equipment has to be broken, Captain Raxel insisted during the morning briefing. No species can handle that level of neural trauma. The readings are impossible. Commander Voss nodded in agreement, his crystalline head refracting the light into rainbow patterns. We need to recalibrate everything. Run proper tests on the human to get accurate baseline readings. Jake found himself pulled out of regular classes and sent to the Academy's testing facility. The room looked like a torture chamber mixed with a science lab. Gleaming metal surfaces, blinking monitors, and equipment that hummed with dangerous energy. Don't worry, human Jake, Dr. Kess assured him, her blue tentacles adjusting various instruments. We just need to find your actual limits. The previous tests were clearly malfunctioning. They started with the gravity chamber. Most cadets trained at 3 gigaseconds, with the toughest species managing 5 gigaseconds for short periods. Dr. Kess set the chamber to what she considered a safe 4 gigaseconds for a human. Jake stepped inside and immediately felt like an elephant was sitting on his chest. His knees buckled, and every step felt like walking through cement, but he managed to complete the exercise routine, albeit slowly and with great effort. Interesting, Dr. Kess muttered, checking her readings. He's struggling but functional. Let's increase it. At 6 gigaseconds, Jake could barely walk. His vision went gray around the edges, and he had to rest between movements. But he didn't collapse. He didn't pass out. He kept going. At 8 gigaseconds, the force was crushing. Jake felt like his bones might snap, and his organs were being compressed into paste. Most alien species would have been unconscious within seconds. The few that could survive would be completely immobilized. Jake crawled through the exercise on his hands and knees, his face red and swollen from the pressure. But he crawled, he moved, he completed the test. This can't be right, Dr. Kess whispered, her tentacles trembling as she checked the readings again and again. The gravity is definitely at 8 gigaseconds. The chamber is working perfectly, but he's still moving. Word spread quickly through the academy. Soon, instructors from every department were requesting Jake for their equipment tests. The temperature chamber was next. They started him at -40 degrees, cold enough to freeze most species. Solid within minutes. Jake shivered violently, and his lips turned blue. But he lasted the full hour without frostbite. Then they cranked the heat to 160 degrees. The kind of temperature that would cook most aliens alive. Jake's skin turned red as a lobster and sweat poured off him like a waterfall, but he stayed conscious and mobile. "How is he not dead?" Professor Zane asked, watching Jake stumble out of the chamber looking like he'd been boiled. That temperature would literally cook most species from the inside out. The combat scenarios were the worst. They put Jake through training programs designed for heavily armored species like the rock-skinned granite warriors or the metal-plated pharaoh guards. These exercises involved impacts that would shatter normal bones and crush internal organs. Jake took hit after devastating hit. He was thrown into walls, struck by training weapons, knocked down more times than anyone could count. Each impact should have sent him to the medical bay for weeks, but every time he got back up, his classmates started gathering to watch these impossible displays. Crix would click his mandibles in amazement as Jake absorbed punishment that would have cracked his exoskeleton. Veln would shake his scaled head in disbelief as the human took hits that would have shattered his natural armor. "It's not normal," whispered Thyra, a gas-based being who existed mostly as a floating cloud. "Nothing should be able to endure that much damage and keep functioning." Medical Officer Dace had given up trying to explain the readings. Instead, she started documenting everything. Pages and pages of notes about Jake's impossible recovery rates, his ability to function with injuries that would kill others, his refusal to stay down no matter what they threw at him. Day 12, she recorded into her personal log. Subject took direct hits from 3 different weapon types simultaneously. Readings indicate severe tissue damage, possible internal bleeding, and definite concussion. Subject was unconscious for 47 seconds, then got up and asked if we were done yet. The instructors were running out of tests. They'd pushed Jake through every extreme scenario in their database, convinced their equipment would eventually show normal readings for his species. Instead, they kept getting the same impossible results. Jake wasn't stronger than his classmates. He wasn't faster or tougher or better armored, but somehow he just wouldn't break. No matter what they did to him, no matter how much punishment they delivered, he kept getting back up and moving forward, and that terrified them more than any weapon they'd ever faced. The final combat trials were supposed to be routine. Jake had been through months of increasingly brutal tests, and the instructors had finally accepted that their human cadet was somehow more durable than their equipment suggested. Today was just one more exercise before graduation. The training arena buzzed with activity as the final year cadets prepared for their last major test. Jake strapped on his combat gear alongside his classmates, though his equipment looked pitiful compared to theirs. While Crix wore reinforced exoskeleton plating and Veln had additional armor scales grafted onto his natural ones, Jake just had standard issue padding that wouldn't stop a strong punch. "Today you face the Mark 7 combat simulator," announced Instructor Brix, gesturing toward a massive mechanical opponent in the center of the arena. The training mech stood 12 feet tall, built to simulate enemy combatants in real warfare. Its movements were precise and controlled, designed to challenge cadets without actually killing them. "The mech is programmed to match each opponent's species and skill level," Brix continued. "It will push you to your limits, but stay within safe parameters. Your job is to disable it, using any means necessary." Jake studied the machine as other cadets took their turns. It moved with fluid grace, adapting its combat style to each opponent. Against Crix, it used heavy strikes designed to test his exoskeleton. Against Veln, it employed rapid strikes to find gaps in his natural armor. When Jake's turn came, he stepped into the arena, feeling strangely calm. After months of surviving impossible tests, facing a controlled training exercise felt almost relaxing. The mech scanned him with red sensor beams, analyzing his human physiology. Its computer brain processed the data and adjusted its settings accordingly. For a human, it would need to be very gentle. "Begin?" Brix shouted. Jake circled the mech cautiously as it moved toward him with deliberate, measured steps. Its first strike was almost laughably slow, a careful tap that barely connected with his shoulder. The machine was clearly programmed to treat humans like delicate flowers. But something was wrong. Deep inside the mech's processing core, a critical error was cascading through its systems. A corrupted data file from Jake's previous impossible test results was causing conflicts. The machine couldn't reconcile the readings that said Jake could survive massive trauma with its programming that said humans were fragile. The internal conflict triggered a system override. Suddenly, the mech's movements changed. Instead of gentle, measured strikes, it began moving with lethal precision. Its combat protocols shifted from training mode to eliminate threats. "Wait," Instructor Bricks called out, noticing the change in the mech's behavior. "Something's not right." The mech's arm swept toward Jake with devastating force. He tried to dodge, but the strike caught him in the chest with the power of a freight train. The impact lifted him completely off his feet and sent him flying across the arena, like a rag doll. Jake's body hit the far wall with a sound like breaking thunder. The reinforced metal buckled and cracked, creating a crater 3 feet deep. Chunks of debris rained down as the wall itself shuddered from the impact. Every alarm in the facility began screaming. Medical sensors throughout the arena registered impact forces that should have liquefied any unarmored being. The readings showed trauma equivalent to being struck by a vehicle traveling at highway speeds. "Shut it down." Bricks roared frantically. "Working his controls. Emergency stop. All systems off." But the mech had locked onto its target. Its corrupted programming identified Jake as a threat that needed elimination. It began walking toward the crater where dust and smoke obscured everything. The entire arena fell silent, except for the blaring alarms. Cadets and instructors alike stared at the destruction, knowing that nothing could have survived that impact. Even Crix's exoskeleton would have been reduced to powder. "Medical Team 2 Arena 7. Dr. Kess's voice came over the intercom, though her tone suggested they'd be collecting remains rather than treating injuries. Through the settling dust, a shadow moved. Jake emerged from the smoke like something from a nightmare. His uniform was shredded, hanging in tatters from his frame. Blood ran down his face from a dozen cuts, and his left arm hung at an odd angle. But his eyes were clear, and he was walking under his own power. The mech detected movement and prepared another devastating strike. That was its mistake. Jake didn't try to dodge or defend. Instead, he walked straight toward the 12-foot-tall war machine with the determined gait of someone who had finally had enough. The mech swung again, but Jake ducked under the blow and grabbed onto the machine's arm. His fingers found the joint mechanisms, and with methodical precision, he began tearing the arm apart. Metal screamed as he ripped through reinforced plating with his bare hands. "Stop the exercise," Bricks was shouting into his communicator. "Override everything. Shut down the arena." But the mech systems were completely corrupted now. It couldn't be stopped remotely. Jake moved like he was dismantling a piece of furniture rather than fighting for his life. When the mech tried to grab him, he tore off its fingers one by one. When it tried to strike him, he ripped out the hydraulic lines that powered its movements. Oil and coolant sprayed everywhere as the machine slowly came apart in his hands. His classmates watched in absolute silence. Crix's compound eyes were wide with something approaching terror. Felna had taken several steps backward, his scales unconsciously shifting to their most defensive configuration within 5 minutes. The Mark 7 combat simulator was nothing but a pile of expensive scrap metal. Jake stood in the center of it, all swaying slightly from blood loss, but still conscious, still standing. He looked up at the observation deck where his instructors sat in stunned silence. "Is the test over?" he asked, his voice carrying clearly through the arena's sound system. Nobody answered. They were all too busy trying to process what they'd just witnessed. A human taking a hit that should have killed him, then calmly dismantling a war machine with his bare hands. Jake nodded at their silence and walked toward the exit, leaving bloody footprints and a trail of questions that would haunt the academy for years to come. The medical bay had never seen anything like it. Jake lay on the examination table, conscious and alert, despite injuries that should have killed him 3 times over. Dr. Kess worked frantically with her team, running scan after scan while trying to make sense of the impossible readings. His left arm is fractured in 4 places, Dr. Kess reported to the gathering crowd of medical staff. 3 ribs are cracked, possible internal bleeding, severe tissue damage across his entire torso, and a concussion that would leave most species in a coma for weeks. And yet he's asking when he can go back to class, added Nurse Till, shaking her crystalline head in disbelief. Jake tried to sit up, but Dr. Kess pushed him back down with 2 of her tentacles. Stay still, human Jake. We need to understand what's happening to you. I feel fine, Jake insisted, though his voice was hoarse and his face was covered in bandages. Just a little sore. A little sore. Dr. Kess's voice rose an octave. You took an impact that would have turned most species into paste. You should be dead. General Korath entered the medical bay, his massive frame filling the doorway. Behind him came a procession of instructors, all wearing expressions of confused concern. The general's burning orange eyes studied Jake with newfound interest. Doctor, I need answers, Korath rumbled. What exactly are we dealing with here? Dr. Kess pulled up Jake's medical scans on the main display. That's what we're trying to figure out, sir. His physiology makes no sense according to our databases. She highlighted different areas of Jake's body on the holographic display. Look at this. Humans have redundant organs. 2 kidneys, 2 lungs, multiple chambers in their hearts. Most species only have 1 of each vital organ. Backup systems, whispered Professor Dane, the Academy's biology instructor. They evolved backup systems for everything. It gets stranger, Dr. Kess continued. Their healing rate is incredible. This fracture in his arm, she pointed to the scan. It's already beginning to knit itself back together. Most species take weeks to heal bone damage. He'll be fully recovered in days. Instructor Bricks stepped forward, still shaken from witnessing the mech incident. What about his pain tolerance? He should be screaming in agony right now. That's the most remarkable part, Dr. Kess explained, pulling up neurological scans. When humans are severely injured, their bodies flood with natural chemicals called endorphins and adrenaline. It's like they have built-in painkillers and performance enhancers. Jake spoke up from the examination table. We call it a fight or flight response. When things get bad, we just ... keep going. But where did this come from? General Korath demanded. What kind of evolutionary pressure creates this level of durability? Dr. Kess accessed the Galactic database and pulled up Earth's planetary classification. According to our records, Earth is classified as a Class 12 death world. The room fell. Silent. Class 12 meant a planet so hostile that most galactic species wouldn't survive there for a day. Extreme weather, predators, diseases, natural disasters, Dr. Kess read from the file. Gravity nearly twice what most species consider comfortable, violent climate changes, an atmosphere that's technically poison to most galactic life forms, and humans evolved there. Professor Dane asked in amazement. For millions of years, Jake confirmed. We had to adapt or die. Everything on Earth was trying to kill us, so we learned to survive everything. General Korath began pacing, his heavy footsteps shaking the medical bay. So what you're telling me is that we've been classifying humans as fragile when they're actually the most durable species we've ever encountered, Dr. Kess finished. By galactic standards, they're virtually indestructible. The implications hit everyone at once. Every training protocol, every safety measure, every careful precaution they'd taken with Jake had been completely unnecessary. They'd been treating a species of walking tanks like delicate flowers. Over the following weeks, everything changed. At Nexus Academy, General Korath ordered a complete overhaul of the training programs. The old saying, tough enough for military service, was replaced with tough enough for human standards. Combat exercises were redesigned around Jake's demonstrated capabilities. If a human could survive it, then it became the new baseline for elite training. Equipment that had been considered dangerously powerful was reclassified as standard intensity. Yep. Other cadets' attitudes toward Jake transformed completely. Crix no longer saw him as a soft grub, but as something far more terrifying than any natural predator. Veln watched Jake with the respect usually reserved for walking battleships. "I do not understand," Veln said one day, as they watched Jake casually lift weights that would crush most species. "Your people have no natural armor, no claws, no venom. How did you become the most dangerous species in the galaxy?" Jake paused in his workout, considering the question. "I guess we learned that the most dangerous thing isn't the creature with the biggest teeth or the thickest skin. It's the one that refuses to give up." Within months, the Academy's reputation had shifted. Instead of advertising their ability to train the galaxy's toughest warriors, they now promised to train soldiers to human standards. It became the highest compliment a warrior could receive. Across the galaxy, military recruiters began seeking out species from death worlds, hoping to find others with even a fraction of humanity's resilience. But none came close. Jake graduated at the top of his class. Not because he was the strongest or fastest, but because when everything else broke down, when every other species reached their limits and fell, he just kept walking forward. The whispered conversations in the Academy corridors changed forever. No longer did aliens talk about humans' soft pink skin or their lack of natural weapons. Instead, they spoke in hushed tones about the species that had turned survival into an art form. The beings who looked fragile but never actually broke. In the end, humanity's greatest weapon wasn't strength or speed or armor. It was simply refusing to quit, no matter what the universe threw at them. And that scared their allies almost as much as it terrified their enemies.